Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and my co host, James Junkin.
Roll Tide, baby. Roll Tide. Good to be
Roll
back.
Tide.
Fall is here. Got the pumpkins, got the skeletons. I don't know, Doc. I love Halloween. What about you?
I like the fall. Fall is my favorite season of the year. Although, as you know, as we go into the fall in both of the industries that you and I are really familiar with, it gets a little harder for people to work. There are a lot more hazards that come around when it gets to be fall, winter season. Maybe we should go over that in another show. I think that'd probably be a good thing for us to talk about because, you know, there are a lot of hazards that come with the weather changing. But just so everybody knows, we are powered by Veriforce. Thank you, Veriforce. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about it. And don't get this confused. We're not going to talk about paper safety, but we are going to talk about documentation. So before we get to that, James, I know you have a rip from the headlines, and it's a big one that came up in the last couple days.
Absolutely. With the government shut down, by the time it airs, maybe the government's back open. But it looks like Congress is in an impasse uh, based on, the lack of an appropriations bill, the lack of funding for the next fiscal year. And it's having an impact on all governmental agencies, including the Department of Labor. So it's going to heavily
Right.
impact OSHA. So OSHA published a plan. If you go over to the Risk Matrix podcast page, you can find the actual plan, the OSHA government shutdown plan, what they're calling their plan for continuation in the lapse, if you will, 76 pages long. But to bring that down to something that's digestible, what we're going to have is basically OSHA is going to furlough 1,204 of its workers. OSHA only has 1,664 workers
Yep.
nationwide. Now, this won't affect state plans at all, but they're basically going to end up with only about 460 employees that'll be retained to perform essential duties. So, what will continue? Investigations of imminent danger situations, workplace fatalities, and catastrophes. So if you have a reportable incident, hospitalization, uh, fatalities, amputation, loss of an eye, all those things that you have to report to OSHA, you still need to continue to do that. They'll also still be working whistleblower complaints that pose imminent threats. That's a little different from just a regular employee complaint. That may be set aside till after the shutdown. Follow-up inspections for high gravity violations and enforcement actions tied to statutory deadlines. So those things are going to continue. Things that are going to cease: routine enforcement activities like your national emphasis programs, your routine inspections, all compliance assistance, outreach, and training. Don't know if that affects the
Yeah.
OTIs or not. So if you're scheduled to go to the 510 or the 500 or the 501 or some OSHA class, go ahead and check with that provider.
Right.
Uh, all rulemaking, ceasing, non-emergency whistleblower protections, administrative and financial operations, they are going to cease throughout this governmental shutdown.
So what does this really look like? Here's what I've heard, and I know you've kind of heard something similar, right? Because we work with a lot of attorneys, and who also work with OSHA, right? So we're kind of in this every day. What I've heard is that pretty much means an area director and a COSHO,
That's
and
what
that's
I've
it.
heard as well. I've actually talked to an area director today who's retired, uh, who sits on our Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board. He said he went back through this in other administrations, and that's how they staffed it. So they're going to try to keep the office open for things like informal conferences, for closing out investigations, for issuing, citations if necessary to try to meet the 60-day deadline I'm sorry, the 6 month deadline, for the issuance of citations. They're
Yeah.
going to try to do that, but
So just
what?
keep in mind that where there used to be 4 COSHOs, there's now 1. Okay,
Right.
so that's 3/4 of the workforce, at least on furlough until further notice. And again, as James said, by the time this airs, we might be back in business. But if it doesn't, or even if it does, right? This is good information because, as James said, um, in past administrations, it's been similar. Similar things have happened, and similar staffing has resulted. So that's a really good rip from the headlines. Thank you for that, James. So let's get into our topic today. And again, I want to preface this right because I don't want people to get us wrong. Because our first episode on this risk matrix was paper safety is not real safety, right? And we both believe that. I think I can speak for both of us with all of our heart, right? Just creating a bunch of paper for the sake of creating a bunch of paper. It doesn't mean you're safe, right? Policies, procedures, all these things. If you don't use them, then they mean nothing, right? Just they're just stacks on a desk. But what we want to talk about today is documentation, and this also comes up in a lot of the work that James and I do with attorneys, as a result of OSHA inspections, or even as a result of just getting involved in people's safety management systems. So, um, I'm teeing you up, James. So bring us in on this one. If you don't document,
It didn't happen.
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. And nobody detests paperwork more than I do, you know. But in the event of litigation, event of an OSHA inspection, even though it may not be required for you to have under the standards, under the regulations, to have certain documentation, here's the question: how do you prove it if it didn't occur? So having readily available things like your 1910-132 D2 written workplace hazard assessment, which is under the PPE standard, which says you must do that and certify it and have it as a document. Somebody asked you to produce that. I was talking to this area director just 2 hours ago. I said, man, that has to be the most common finding I find in the assessments we do. No one does it. No one does it. And that
You know
not
what
being
they tell you, James,
a
is what you told me earlier, right? They say, well, when we see a hazard,
we
we
see a
assess it,
hazard,
we
we
do something about it. But
something
who
about it.
documents that process?
That's exactly right. So written documentation. We all know we have to have written documentation when it comes to training, and we think of that when it comes to like regulatory training. If I'm taking fall protection training, it tells me exactly what I have to be documenting. But where I see a significant amount of gap is when it comes to how to do your job training, being qualified as a worker, right?
Right.
So if you've got workers operating heavy equipment, how did you train that worker? And I'm not against on the job training, nor am I against, saying that every piece of machinery out there, we got to go to a classroom, sit down, look at a PowerPoint, have an instructor, etc. But whatever your process is for doing that, have some sort of paper trail for documentation of those qualifications.
So let's just kind of evaluate that little situation right there, right? If you have a special piece of equipment on site, there are some standards that tell you exactly what you need to do to train somebody. But let's say it's not. A lot of heavy equipment in construction industry doesn't isn't spoken to in the standard. What I've seen people do is they do on the job training. They document that in their daily logs, or they document that in a employee's file. But one of the best pieces of evidence is the competency check, right?
Absolutely.
Did you do a competency check? And if there was an incident that you will also document in a disciplinary filing, have you done retraining? Have you corrected that with more training or a recheck of their competency?
So things like qualified riggers, Subpart CC. You used to work at a crane company, crane and rigging company, as a safety director in the past. You understand under Subpart CC, there are specific training requirements and documentation required for the crane operator. But what about the rigger? It doesn't say you have to go to some nationally recognized rigging training school. And how do most people learn to rig? They learn to
On the
rig
job.
out doing the hands-on portion on the job. So who determines whether you're qualified? The company determines whether you're qualified. But if there's an incident, we need to be able to produce and show how we went about determining you were qualified. And
Right.
these things particularly come up during OSHA inspections, post incident, when something has happened involving a worker. And then we're saying, well, was the worker actually qualified to operate this piece of equipment? Or was the
Right.
worker
Right.
actually qualified to conduct this training? How did you go about it?
So with riggers, that's a really good question. A lot of people learn to rig on the fly, right? They learn it from other riggers, older riggers, people who've been around longer, people who are really good at it. But a important piece of that training is how much can rigging handle and what's the appropriate pitch to use or what's the appropriate material to use. And even in the crane company, that was something that we covered in a classroom setting and also tested on to make sure that people knew the things that they were applying in the field, that there's some theory behind it, right? So,
Absolutely.
so on the job training may sometimes do it, and you may be able to document on the job training, but you want to make sure that you get the information that should be done in a classroom, the theory, etc., gets done in a classroom.
Well, there's another side of this, and this is when it typically comes up, is documentation when you want to exert an unpreventable employee misconduct defense. Even things that should be common sense, right? Common sense is not a defense. It's not a defense. And your documentation surrounding unpreventable employee misconduct has to meet the 5 elements that OSHA has set out for it. And the first is an established work rule. What are your work rules? That's your policies, or that's in your site specific plan. You need to be able to go to a document and be able to produce that document that says this is the rule. So anytime we've had this situation where we've done defense in OSHA inspections to citations, or we're in the investigative process and we want to demonstrate to the compliance officer who says, hey, what's your rules on this, or what's your policies? Even though OSHA may not say that you specifically have to have a policy, it may not be required by regulation. If you don't, how do you prove you have the work rule, right? So having it written down is the established work rule. And if you have that rule and have the employee follow that rule, then, it would have prevented the incident. Like, for example, you end up doing a strike with material handling equipment on an energized power line. What are we looking for? We're looking for your policies related to power line electrical safety. Does it say that workers need to maintain at least, 10 feet of distance if the power line's 50 kV or less? In your other material handling policies, maybe you address it there. Got to have a work rule. The second part of that is you have to have documentation that the rule has been adequately communicated to employees. And I see this all the time. Well,
Here's a
we
bunch of
gave,
stuff.
go
Yep.
ahead.
Here's a bunch of stuff.
Here's a
Read
bunch
it.
of stuff.
Sign
Read
this
it.
piece of
Sign
paper.
that. That will not suffice. That's not training, right? It may work. It may not work. If the rule involves training that's required under a standard, for example, like I just put out there, that's required by regulation. OSHA might say that does not constitute training. Reading and signing is not training. So the training that's happening has to be documented. The rule has to be communicated. You have to have some way to prove it. And what I find is there becomes all these rules that are out there on the job site uh, that aren't not necessarily addressed specifically within the standard. And we don't have a policy for it, or we didn't discuss it. in a manner. We got to have some way that we've communicated it. So whether it's training or a safety meeting or something, you need some type of documentation to prove that you've told the employees and they understand it. And it's really great, Doc, if their signature is up under.
Yeah. So I do this a lot with companies that I work with. We do tailgate safety meetings every day, right? They do a safety huddle. And one of the things that I go over with the foreman and the superintendent is, are there important rules to what we're doing today, or important policies or important procedures to what we're doing today? And if there are, pull them out and cover them in the safety huddle. I don't care how long it takes, cover them, talk about it. Are there any questions? Do you think any of these do or don't apply to us? And yes, get their signature on it, or make sure that you document that A, you covered those things, and B, that you've documented the people that were present for that. Because
That
God
J,
forbid that person get on a piece of equipment and hit the power line.
that JHA, that JSA, that thing that you're doing every day is so important post incident, right? Because in this incident, you're going to be able to have on the JHA the rule. You know, if we've got energized power lines, we're going to say stay away, whatever the company policy is, but at least OSHA's minimum from those energized power lines. And we may have other steps necessary. For example, make sure you call the power company and have them de-energize or shield the power line or whatever it is. But having that helps us be able to document that the rule, whatever it is, has been adequately communicated to the employee. Now,
So,
no,
can I
go ahead.
just interject one
Yeah,
thing? Just having that JHA does not mean that you've documented it. You have to cover the JHA. You have to go over the JHA, and the people have to know what's on the JHA, right? You can't just
absolutely.
take a JHA for the entire, every time we do this and stick it in a binder and say the JHA was there and we've documented that this is what we
Or,
do.
or just passing it around and having everybody sign it because, part of an OSHA investigation's employee interviews. So when they
Mhm.
come to it and they say, all right, tell us about this day, whatever, did you review? Well, I really don't know. What is
Never
that?
heard that before, right?
What is that? The sign-in sheet? You mean the sign-in sheet, sir, ma'am? All right. So then we're getting to where the rule is not adequately communicated. So one of the best ways to communicate the rule, of course, is in training, having documentation of that training, slides from that training, test. You know, we had an inspection where we were able to actually exert this defense in a fatality. And the employee clearly violated the rule. We had policy, we had training, we had the JHA, but accompanied with the training, we also had a test. Okay. When you're creating your own training program, and that's why I like Bear Force's training that we utilize along some of these same lines, is because when we write these questions, we write that with a competency in mind. What's the critical rules? I mean, I don't find it very useful to have a test that says a hard hat goes on what? Your head, your foot, your elbow, your knee. Come on, bro. But having something on the test that said, uh, you know, what
What's
is
the
the
minimal distance from a
minimal
power
distance
line?
to the power line? And having the employee actually answer that really helps. That really helps. And not only is it helping the defense of this, it helps in the retention of that. I did an assessment about 6 months ago where we had a new hired worker, and that worker was just 6 months out of their training. They could not tell me not one topic, not a single topic that was in their new hire orientation training. And this is supposed to be the safety fundamentals that they need to know, the basic stuff they need to go out on the job and to protect themselves. So,
Yep.
uh, number three, Number three in an unpreventable employee misconduct defense is the employer has to take steps to discover violations. So what's that? That's your
It's
job
inspections.
inspections, right? That's your inspections. And a lot of our listeners are doing it. They're going out, they're walking around, they're seeing things, they're pointing stuff out. Hey, put your hard hat on. Hey, get out of that trench. We don't have a trench box in it, etc. But if you can't document it, did it happen?
So let me just add something to that, because I've seen a lot of this with my clients lately, right? They have people that are inspecting their job sites, they hire somebody. I do this too as a service, right? Go out and inspect people's job site. But here's the thing. If every single job site inspection is coming back, looks great, no issues, and you present that as part of your evidence that you're doing inspections, I would say that you're probably not doing enough. And there are a lot of inspections that go on out there, and they're feel good inspections. They're like, everybody's doing great. The guy stops by. I even had somebody tell me today on a job site that, that their previous inspector used to roll down his window. Everything okay here? And if you gave a thumbs up, off he'd go. So,
Yeah.
feel good inspections. I mean, I love to feel good too about the great things that I'm doing. But if they're not finding hazards, they're not making corrective improvements, even if they're not something that's a OSHA violation or whatever. If you're making safety improvements, at least document those, right? Because it shows that you're doing your due diligence to look for things. Okay, so again, just creating paper for creating paper, or creating inspections for creating inspections, is not the way to go. You need to create a process by which you're continually improving what you're looking at and what you're doing and what you're correcting.
I 100% agree. So that can come in the form of some type of checklist. You can automate that some way, but have some documentation. And let me follow this up. This is also good for management to do, not just the safety professional out there. Management needs to get involved in some of these job site inspections. OSHA loves, and as a safety professional, I love superintendents come out and do a walkthrough, and it's documented. Not only that they did it, but what did they discover? I'm gonna echo you, Dr. Martin. If everything's perfect all the time and no one's found any type of safety violations, uh, month after month after month, either we're doing what we call in the Navy gun decking it, which is just pencil whipping it, or
Yep.
you have the most elite safety program in the world. So why is OSHA here doing
I was
something
gonna say that begs the question: how did somebody get seriously hurt and how did they die? Right? If
exactly?
if there's never any hazards on your job site, then it.
Absolutely. So just a little asterisk next to this. You don't have to have discovered a violation for the things that they're inspecting. So let's say they come out, for some reason there's an incident in confined space. You need to show that you did inspections that included confined space. But if you didn't find anything wrong with what was going on with those activities, that's okay. You just have to demonstrate you're doing some type of steps to discover safety violations. Then the next part of this is critical and where it fails all the time. You have to have taken steps to enforce rules, and you have to show documented evidence of uniformly issued discipline. And this is where things go astray. Because most of the time we just handle this on the job site. Hey, put your
Right.
hard hat on. Hey, go over here. Get down from there. You know, why aren't you tied off? Where's your spotter? All those type things. You have to have evidence of a disciplinary program. So what are they looking for? If they say, show us your evidence of your disciplinary program. Number one, do we have a policy? What does our policy say for progressive discipline? And then how are we following through? And it looks really good. OSHA doesn't say you have to have a progressive disciplinary program. But let's be honest, we're not firing everybody because somebody forgot to put on their safety glasses, or they jumped out of the truck without their hard hat, or they made a mistake. Human beings are human beings. They're going to make mistakes. But if it's verbal warnings or written warnings or suspensions or whatever, we need some type of documentation to demonstrate to the compliance officer you are enforcing the rule. No documentation, this fails.
Right. And I even say I was gonna say, I even say that if you're gonna give a verbal warning, a lot of times what I say to the foremen and superintendents is that put it on your daily log, right? If you've got
Well,
nowhere else to put it and you've given a verbal warning, just memorialize it somehow on your daily log saying this is what happened so that you can go back when it comes to a formal written warning and rely upon the fact, yes, this did happen, right?
and I want to say one more thing that I come up about documentation. Not in all cases, but in most cases, a safety meeting does not equal training. Okay? Training needs to be conducted in training. Safety meetings need to be topically, they need to be related to what's going on perhaps the job site. If you're combining the two and doing safety meetings, toolbox talks, whatever you want to call it, that needs to be about what's going on at the job at that time. It's very inefficient to cover, and most of the safety meetings are short. They lack the detail necessary. So even though you've got a topic at the top that says toolbox talk, safety meeting, heat illness prevention, that's great. You should do that, but that should be supplemental to formalized training on those type programs.
Right,
That's just my opinion.
right.
But most of these things don't last long enough, and what, in your experience, Doc, what's the average toolbox talk?
How long is it?
Yeah,
I mean, the longest probably is like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It depends on how many people are on a job site, right? Because I work in
that's right.
construction. If there's several people, several trades, then it takes a little bit longer. But usually, what I want people to do is cover the hot topics, the things that are sticky, right? That are going to get you, and also to go over the JHAs and go over the SDS for the day, right? Those are the things that
Right.
I want to see documented on the daily log to show that we're actually doing the due diligence for the job of the day, right?
And I think when you present that as a package, you're complying with the regulations, but you're also showing how you're building upon the foundation of your policies, your training, your implementation. You're taking the steps necessary to protect your workers. And sometimes workers make mistakes,
Yep.
right? But if we don't have the proper documentation, it's hard to make an argument to OSHA or in wrongful death cases or in gross negligent cases that you're doing what you say you do.
So let me finish with a hot tip from things that I've been doing lately. I've been doing a lot of job site inspections, and when I walk around, again, I have some clients that haven't ever had a safety inspection that hasn't been "You're doing great, thumbs up, drive away," and now they're getting uh, you know questions about things. And the way that I tell people to approach it is, if I ask the question, you can pretty darn well bet that a COSHO from OSHA is going to ask the question. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So scaffolds are a lot of things that I see a lot, right? And many of the companies that I work with, they document scaffold inspections on an inspection checklist, and they do it in a electronic manner, and they do it every day, and they document it every day. And the question always comes up, where why do I not see a tag on a scaffold, right? Well, here's the thing. If I'm asking, OSHA's going to ask, right? A passerby may ask. People ask, right? And you want to make sure that you're not only are you communicating with the people on the job site, the other trades that are going to use that scaffold or, etc., but you also want to communicate to anybody who might ask that you are doing your due diligence and documenting what OSHA asks you to document.
Hey,
So sometimes double document is not a bad thing.
same thing like fire extinguisher inspection. It doesn't require you to have a tag, but the tag's visual, right?
That's right.
You can see it when we're doing our walk around inspection, and they see the fire extinguisher. Oh, we got something else. It's allowed by the regulation, but I always think having a good visual there lets users know it's been inspected. It's not in the back office someplace. You having double documentation doesn't hurt at all.
Right. I love the visual cues. So that's just my hot tip as we close this one out, James. So you got anything else that you want to say? Hot tip on documentation. It's important, and it's not paper safety. Believe me when I say this. Documentation is not throwing papers places, putting papers on desks, etc., just to do it, right? It's a methodical approach to making sure all your ducks in a row in case you get asked.
It is
And you don't
very
want to get asked.
it is very uncomfortable during OSHA interviews when they ask, "Well, what's your policy on this?" Well, how did you communicate it? Well, we had a meeting. Okay. Well,
And it
these
goes a long way.
you
It
do.
goes a long way when that guy's sitting there in an interview and he says, "I've never heard that before in my life."
Absolutely. So, some tips from us to be better organized, be better prepared. Also help you not only in OSHA inspections, but also in staying organized and helping identify gaps that you have in your program for continuous improvement. So if you're looking for leading indicators, things like that to track, hey, having this documentation is part of that in improving your safety management system. Look, we appreciate all of you that take time to come and to view this podcast. We do it for you, and you can see it on a variety of platforms. They're there on LinkedIn, Veriforce's LinkedIn page, on the Risk Matrix
LinkedIn page.
Podcast LinkedIn page, Veriforce's YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and then there's another one. What is it, Doc? You remember?
Amazon. Hey, Alexa,
Amazon.
play the Risk
Absolutely.
Matrix podcast.
Amazon Alexa, play the Risk Matrix podcast, and you'll get us live. Share this with your friends. Reach down in the comments on the episodes on our LinkedIn page. We'll be more than happy to interact with you there or on our private pages. Again, we do this for you. We enjoy it. We enjoy having a discussion, all in an effort to help you bring your workers home safe from high hazard jobs. Dr. Martin, take us out.
So, like James said, we'd like you to like, subscribe, listen, share, do all those things to get us out there. And if you like what we do, again, reach out to us. We're happy to help, happy to shoot our ideas around with you. We've always got an opinion on everything. It may not be right. Hopefully, a lot of times it is right when it comes to safety and risk. But thank you so much for listening. And as always,
Roll Tide, baby. Y'all keep bringing those workers home safe. Roll Tide. Out.
roll tide.